Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing a review of Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the first book in the Founders trilogy and I was really excited going into this series because I had heard really great things about this book. It was one of those books that I did have some expectation going into it because I just heard really great things about Robert Jackson Bennett's writing. I'm really excited to read his other series as well. And so as you can probably tell, I was pretty psyched to start reading this series. Unfortunately, I did not have the best experience with it. And this is one of those cases I'm genuinely really disappointed that I didn't like it. And there were aspects that I did like. The first kind of 2/3 of the book were really enjoyable and then it really just went down a very fast decline for me. So with that in mind, let's jump in. I'm not going to bother doing a summary. Go check out the blurb if you want to find out what this book is about. But let's jump into what I liked about it. So, as I said, the first 2/3 of this book are really solid. I think we get a really great introduction into the world. I really like the way that it's set up. We have a really good sense of where we are and what's happening in the world. There is a kind of industrial vibe to this series that I actually really enjoy. And there's a lot of kind of words and phrases that remind me of the kind of 16th century banking families in Italy, specifically in Florence. So like as an example, Campos are like the banking families, like the merchant families. It also reminded me of like the merchant families of Venice as well. Like it just felt like actual periods of history that I've read quite a lot about. And so I really love the fact that the world felt very familiar to me. So when you kind of combine that with the industrial setting as well, like, I don't know, it just kind of mishmashed two settings that I really enjoy, and I thought it did it very, very well. Invention, innovation, and engineering play a really critical role in this book, and I love it. I absolutely loved it. Those are kind of my favourite things to learn about whenever it comes to learning about a new culture or a new part of the world. Like, what were the things that they built themselves, what were the things that they created themselves, and then how did that kind of get distributed around the world. We see some of that being explored in this book and I really enjoyed it. I found those bits to actually be my favourite. And it felt like kind of historical fantasy in some places. Next thing I really liked was the fact that there is quite a lot of suspense built in from the start. Like the book really does start off with a bang, and it's a bang that makes the book very interesting to read because you are constantly kind of kept on the tip of your toes and you're trying to figure out what's happening. It's really good. Like it is really, really good. The issue is that doesn't really sustain until the end, and I'll come on to that a little bit later, but I think the way that it was framed at the start was really solid. My favourite bit about the book was the magic system. I absolutely loved this magic system, and I'm so disappointed that I'm not going to continue reading on with the series, and I'll come on to that more a little bit later on because I just love this magic system. It's got two of my favourite tropes. One is sentient objects. I love sentient objects. It's why I love Warbreaker. I just absolutely love Stormblood in that book. I think when it's done really well, which I think it was in this book, I just absolutely love it. Like I eat it up. And then the other thing is the magic system specifically as it relates to the idea of like imbuing objects with life. Like I just love that, like being able to re-engineer objects against what maybe their original purpose was just such a cool idea. Like if anybody knows of any other books or authors that have done something similar, please let me know down below. Please let me know down below because I really want to read it more because it's just such a cool concept. Like what gets cooler than that? Like it combines engineering and magic. I love it. Like literally my dream. So I really, really love that. When it comes on to characters, there's 2 or 3 characters that I really liked. So my favourite one was probably Clef. So Clef is the sentient object. Just really enjoyed Clef. Like really, really enjoyed his part. Like he's funny, he's very sarcastic, he's kind of a bit of a know-it-all, kind of love it. And he doesn't take himself too seriously, but at the same time, he's very wise. Like, I just love those types of characters. I also really liked and Berenice. I thought they were a really funny duo. And I thought Berenice was quite witty and I would have liked more time with her. Also, is kind of like your typical kind of academic inventor, like a bit wacky, a bit weird, but like you're kind of here for it as well. So I like those characters. I think the rest of the characters were a bit one-dimensional, and again, I'll come on to that a little bit later on, but I think some of the characters were fleshed out quite well, and I would have liked more time with them. And then I think in terms of the thematic work, I don't think there's anything new here. It's a lot of the same thematic work that we see in these types of heist books. We have our main character, Santra, really kind of figuring out who she is and what she wants to do and how she wants to contribute to the world. We also get the whole kind of trope around found family. There's also commentary on like post-industrialization and what impact that has on people who can take advantage of that versus people who are just there for the ride. And I thought that was quite interesting, and I suspect there's going to be more commentary on that later on in the books that I would have liked to have read, but I don't care enough to continue. So that in mind, let's move on to the things that I didn't like. So the final 1/3 of the book was just a car crash, in my opinion. It rushed so much that it felt very unnatural, and it felt like the author had been told that they only had half the word count they actually had to finish off the story, which it just felt like it could have been drawn out. And it's very rare that I say this, like, it could be drawn out, but it really could have been drawn out a bit more, and we could have had a bit more time with the characters to really create that familiarity. But it was just so rushed, so rushed, and I really did not like it. Also, by the end of the book, all of the characters kind of sounded the same. They all speak the same way, they all use the same vernacular, they all have the same tone of voice. So by the end of it, you don't really know who's saying what. Like, obviously you're reading who is saying what, but they all sound the same. Nobody sounds that distinct, and it feels very weird because they all use the same language and the same cadence and the same tone. Like, it's just very bizarre. And that moves me on to our main character, Sancha, who, you know, she's a chancer, she's a thief, she's trained, she's highly skilled. I just think we've seen that character so many times now, and I'm so bored of it. I'm just really bored of it. She didn't really get much growth in the first book. In the author's defense, she doesn't really necessarily need to go into much growth in this book, given that it is a trilogy, so I'm assuming she will grow later on in the series. But I just did not really feel a kinship to her. I liked Clef, and her and Clef always have scenes together because she is the only one that can talk to Clef. She was just very one-dimensional, and I just did not find her engaging at all. One of the characters that I really liked at the start was Dandelo. And he's part of one of the big merchant houses, and he's like, you know, he's quite well-to-do and all of that. But he kind of became very one-dimensional by the end of it, and I kind of forgot he was in the book at one point. Like, he just wasn't in it, and it was very bizarre. And I feel like the secondary cast of characters also just felt the same. Like, nobody really felt fleshed out. Nobody really felt like they really served a purpose, and that's a real shame, because I think there were some great beginnings of characters, but it just didn't really make me feel bought into them by the end of it. The other thing on characters is the main villain. I'm not going to say who it is because it is something that you learn kind of over the progression of the book. Very mustache twirly, very one-dimensional, very little depth, just kind of funny, but like not in a good way. And I just didn't like the character at all. It was very predictable also, like what was going to happen to the villain, and yeah, you could see it coming a mile away, even if you just remotely thought about what was happening. And then the last thing I will say is that I do think heist stories, fantasy heist stories, are very common now, and I do think they're very hard to do. I think it's very hard to have a fresh take on that kind of subgenre, because I feel like all of the books are starting to blur into one, and they're starting to become very predictable. So I have read a fair few, so maybe if I'd read this at the start of my heist fantasy journey, maybe I would have thought a lot differently about it. But I think now, having read a few, it just feels like the same as almost every other fantasy heist story that I've ever read. So I won't be continuing on with the series. I think the negatives, unfortunately, outruled the positives. For me, the most important thing is your characters, and I just didn't really like our main character, and I didn't really care for the other big characters, apart from maybe also, like I said, and Clef. But again, I don't care enough about them that I want to continue on with the series, unfortunately. I do really love Robert Jackson Bennett's writing. His writing is very accessible though, and I'm very excited to see how his writing is in the, I think it's called the Divine Cities trilogy, with the first book being City of Stairs. I have that entire trilogy, and I'm really excited to read it, because I've also heard it's very political. So I might try to read that this year. And then the author also had the first book in a new series come out, I think it was this year as well, which I also have. So I'm not by any means completely turned off by this author. Honestly, the complete opposite, actually. Like, I'm very intrigued to see him do more stuff. And yeah, I'm really curious what other people think about this book, because this book seems to be very loved, at least when it comes to people who've reviewed it on Goodreads. Very beloved book. I'm really curious to hear anybody had a similar experience to me. If you did, please let me know down below in the comments. I gave this book a 3 stars, like not the worst, but also not the best. And yeah, it's a bit unfortunate, to be honest. Let me know down in the comments below. Let me know what you thought about this book, and let me know if you do have any recommendations of a similar magic system, because I'm dying to read more like this. So there we have it. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I will see you in my next video. Stay safe, take care, and I will see you very soon. Bye.